Welcome to Shiver Audiobooks, and thank you so much for joining us today. Before we head into the shadows, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more free stories. Now enjoy The Last Witness.
Chapter 1. The Silent Ground. Detective Jack Miller didn't believe in ghosts, but as he stood at the edge of the ravine in Blackwood Falls, he could swear the air felt heavy with them. It was an unseasonably cold Tuesday, the kind of morning where the fog clings to the ground like a burial shroud, refusing to let the sun through. Jack adjusted the collar of his coat and stepped over the yellow crime scene tape that fluttered in the wind. Below him, in a hollow where the earth had recently shifted after the heavy rains, a group of forensics experts moved like pale shadows in their white Tyvek suits. "How bad is it, Miller?" Jack turned to see his partner, Sarah Vance, picking her way down the muddy slope. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. None of them had. "It's not just the one," Jack said, his voice raspy from too much caffeine and too little silence. He pointed toward the excavation site. The rain washed away the top layer of silt. "We came here for a missing hiker report, but the earth decided to give up a much older secret." He led her closer to the pit. There, partially cradled by the roots of an ancient oak tree, was a fragment of something white and jagged. It wasn't a stone. It was a humerus, a human upper arm bone. And next to it, the remains of a rusted metal locket. "Forensics says it's been here at least 2 decades," Jack continued, looking up at the towering trees that surrounded them. "But here's the thing, Sarah. This wasn't an accident. There's a clean entry wound in the back of the skull they just uncovered 3 feet to the left." He knelt by the edge of the pit, his eyes narrowing. He had spent 15 years on the force, but this felt different. Most cold cases were whispers of the past, fading memories that no longer had a pulse. But as he stared at the remains, he felt a prickle of heat at the back of his neck. 20 years, Sarah whispered, shivering. "Who was she?" "That's the wrong question," Jack replied, standing up and looking toward the deep, dark heart of the forest. "The question isn't who she was. The question is who else was in these woods that night. Because someone walked away from this grave, and I have a feeling they've been watching the news, waiting for this day to come." Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He had a job to do, but he couldn't shake the feeling that by uncovering these bones, he hadn't just found a victim. He had started a clock, and somewhere out there, the person who pulled the trigger just heard it start ticking. Chapter 2. The Shattered Mirror. The coffee was still steaming in the mug, the scent of hazelnut filling the small, sunlit kitchen of the apartment in Seattle. For a moment, everything felt normal. I was just Claire, a freelance graphic designer with a quiet life, a collection of succulents on the windowsill, and a past that started exactly 7 years ago when I got my new Social Security card. I reached for the remote on the counter, intending to find some background noise while I worked on a new layout. I didn't want the news. I never wanted the news. But the TV flickered to life on a local morning broadcast, and the words on the screen turned the blood in my veins to ice. Breaking news. Macabre discovery in Blackwood Falls. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My hand stayed frozen on the remote as the camera panned over a rain-soaked forest. I knew those trees. I knew the way the mist hung low over that specific ravine, like it was trying to hide the shame of the earth. The reporter was standing near a line of yellow tape. Behind her, a man in a dark coat, a detective, was staring directly into the camera. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp, searching. "Authorities have confirmed the discovery of human remains dating back 20 years, the reporter said, her voice chirpy and professional, oblivious to the fact that she was dismantling my life in real time. "Forensics experts are currently examining a locket found at the scene, believed to belong to the victim." The locket! A sudden, sharp memory pierced my brain. The feel of the cold metal against my palm as I hid in the dirt, the way it had been torn from my neck when I scrambled through the briars to get away. I had left a piece of myself in that hole. And now, the world had dug it up. I turned the TV off, but the silence that followed was even worse. It was heavy, suffocating. My reflection in the darkened screen looked like a stranger, wide eyes, pale skin, a mask of terror. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. Was that black SUV parked there yesterday? Was the man on the corner looking up at my balcony, or was he just checking his watch? The paranoia, the old friend I had spent years trying to kill, was back. It sat on my chest, whispering that the clock had finally run out. They had found the grave. They would find the DNA. And eventually, the man with the calm, professional voice would realize that his work wasn't finished. He had missed one. I didn't pack a bag. I couldn't afford the time. I grabbed my laptop, my emergency cash from the floorboard, and my car keys. As I closed the door to the apartment, I knew I would never see it again. Claire was dead. Amy was back. And this time, there was nowhere left to run. Chapter 3. The Cleaner. The office was silent, save for the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock that had stood in the corner for 30 years. Senator Edward Thorne sat behind his mahogany desk, the leather chair creaking slightly as he leaned back. Outside the window, the city was a blur of lights and ambition, but his focus was entirely on the tablet lying flat on his desk. The video loop played without sound. He didn't need to hear the reporter's voice. He knew the location by heart. He recognized the slant of the ravine and the way the roots of that oak tree twisted like veins. He looked at his hands. They were steady. At 64, Edward Thorne had built a career on being the man who remained steady while everyone else panicked. He had survived scandals, recessions, and political wars. He had become a kingmaker because he knew how to bury things, secrets, debts, and people. But the earth, it seemed, was less reliable than he was. 20 years, he whispered to the empty room. He tapped a button on his desk phone. A moment later, a man entered. He was dressed in a suit that cost more than most people's cars, with a face so forgettable he could walk through a crowd like a ghost. This was Elias, the man who handled the things the senator couldn't acknowledge in writing. "You've seen the news from Blackwood Falls," Thorne said. It wasn't a question. "I have, sir," Elias replied. "The forensics team is moving fast. They found the locket. They're looking for a name." Thorne stood up and walked to the window, his reflection ghostly against the glass. "The locket isn't the problem, Elias. The girl is the problem. We checked the records back then. No body was ever found. No death certificate. Just a child who vanished into thin air. She'd be a woman now," Elias noted. "If she's even alive." "She's alive," Thorne snapped, his eyes flashing with a sudden, sharp heat. "I felt her that night. I felt her eyes on me in the dark. I made a mistake. I assumed the forest would finish what I started. I assumed time would do my work for me." He turned back to the room, his face a mask of iron. The man on the campaign posters, the man the public loved, was gone. In his place was the predator who had stood in the rain 20 years ago. "Find her," Thorne commanded. "I don't care what it costs. I don't care how many lives you have to peel back to find the right one. The police are looking for a victim. I want the witness." He sat back down, picking up a silver fountain pen and turning it over in his fingers. "And Elias, when you find her, don't bring her to me. Just make sure that this time she stays in the ground where she belongs." Chapter 4. The Digital Ghost. Jack Miller sat in the darkened bullpen of a precinct, the blue light of his monitor etched into the lines of his face. He wasn't looking at bones anymore. He was looking at life. "I found her, Jack," Sarah said, leaning over his shoulder with a cardboard tray of lukewarm coffees. She tapped the screen. "Or at least, I found where she stopped existing." On the screen was a school photo from 2004. A girl with bright eyes and a lopsided smile. Amy. Behind her, a series of red flags on a digital map showed her family's sudden disappearance from every government database just days after the shooting. "She didn't die in those woods," Jack muttered, his eyes scanning the data. "She ran, and she's been running for 20 years. But everyone leaves a footprint eventually. A credit card swipe, a traffic cam, a library card." At that exact moment, 300 miles away, Amy stood in a crowded gas station off Interstate 5. The air smelled of stale tobacco and cheap floor cleaner. She kept her baseball cap pulled low, her eyes fixed on the flickering television mounted above the rows of candy bars. The news was still playing. They were showing a photo of the locket. My locket! She reached into her pocket and pulled out a burner phone she had bought 20 minutes ago. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She needed to know what they knew. She logged into a secure, encrypted server, a trick she'd learned years ago to stay invisible. Back at the precinct, Jack's monitor chirped. A small red dot pulsed on a map of the state. "We've got a hit," Jack whispered, his heart hammering against his ribs. Someone just accessed the sealed case files for Blackwood Falls from a private IP address in Medford. Someone who knows exactly what they're looking for. He grabbed his jacket, the coffee forgotten. "Sarah, get the Medford PD on the line. Give them the coordinates. Tell them to look for a woman alone, mid-20s, likely looking like she's seen a ghost." In the gas station, Amy felt a sudden, cold shiver, the kind that comes when you're being watched by eyes you can't see. She looked up. A police cruiser was pulling into the lot, its tires crunching on the gravel. She didn't wait for her change. She didn't look back. She slipped out the side door, just as the bells above the entrance chimed for the arriving officer. Jack sprinted toward his car, his mind racing. He was so close. He could feel her. But as he ignited the engine, he saw a black sedan pull out of the shadows of the precinct parking lot, tailing him at a distance. The police were looking for her. He was looking for her. And Thorne's people were already behind him. The hunt wasn't just starting. It was colliding. Chapter 5. The Rain-Slicked Edge. The roadside motel was a relic of the 70s, with a flickering neon sign that hummed like a swarm of angry hornets. I sat in the dark of room 14, my back against the door, holding a kitchen knife I'd bought at a grocery store 2 towns back. It felt pathetic in my hand, a toy against the monsters I knew were coming. Then came the knock. 3 sharp, rhythmic raps. "Amy, I know you're in there. My name is Detective Jack Miller. I'm alone." I didn't move. My heart was a frantic bird trapped in my chest. "Go away," I croaked. "There is no Amy here. I saw the locket." "Amy," his voice came through the wood, muffled but steady. "I know about the oak tree. I know about the man you saw 20 years ago. If you don't open this door, the people following me will get here first. And they aren't here to talk." I looked at the window. A black sedan had just rolled into the parking lot, its headlights cut, drifting like a shark through deep water. I turned the lock. The door swung open, and a man stood there, soaked to the bone, his eyes wide with a mixture of relief and terror. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a man who had realized he'd walked into a trap. "Out the back," he hissed, grabbing my arm. "Now!" We scrambled through the bathroom window, just as the front door of the motel room was kicked off its hinges. The sound of a suppressed gunshot, a soft thud few, shattered the ceramic lamp on the bedside table we had just left behind. We ran into the woods behind the motel, the mud sucking at our shoes. We reached a clearing where the rain turned the world into a gray blur. Jack stopped, pulling his service weapon, spinning around to face the darkness we'd just escaped. "Who are they?" I screamed over the wind. "How did they find us?" Jack didn't look at me. His gaze was fixed on the silhouette of a man emerging from the trees. It wasn't the police. It was Elias, his face as cold and blank as a tombstone. "They're not after me, Amy," Jack whispered, his hand trembling slightly as he aimed his gun. "They're after the only thing that can destroy Edward Thorne. You." For the first time in 20 years, I wasn't looking at a memory. I was looking at the present. The man in the suit raised a silenced pistol, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Jack. "Detective," Elias said, his voice cutting through the storm. "Step away from the witness. This is a matter of national security. Don't make yourself part of the evidence." I looked at Jack. He had a choice. He could hand me over and live, or stay and die with the girl he just met. The silence between them was louder than the thunder. Jack took a step back, but he didn't lower his gun. He grabbed my hand, his grip like iron. "Run," he whispered. "And this time, don't you dare stop." Chapter 6. The Tightening Noose. The engine of Jack's unmarked Ford screamed as he shoved it into gear, the tires spitting gravel and mud like shrapnel. I was shoved against the passenger door, my fingers digging into the dashboard, so hard the plastic bit into my skin. Behind us, the twin glare of the black sedan's headlights loomed in the rearview mirror, 2 unblinking eyes that refused to fade. "They're gaining," I choked out, watching the speedometer needle climb past 80. Jack didn't respond. His jaw was set, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. He swerved onto a narrow logging road, the car bottoming out with a bone-jarring thud. We were plunging deeper into the dark, away from the main roads, away from any hope of a passing patrol car or a witness. "We can't outrun them, not in this," Jack finally said, his voice tight. He glanced at the GPS, which was spinning aimlessly in the dead zone of the mountains. "They have satellite tracking. They aren't following the car, Amy. They're following the signal Thorne's people have on every law enforcement frequency in the state." "Then we're dead," I whispered. "Not yet." Suddenly, Jack slammed on the brakes. The car skidded, fishtailing toward the edge of a steep embankment before coming to a violent halt. Before I could ask what he was doing, he reached across me, grabbed my phone in his own, and threw them both out the window into the rushing waters of a creek below. "Out! Now!" We scrambled into the brush, just as the second car roared up the path. I expected them to stop, to search the car, but they didn't. They didn't even slow down. The black sedan sped past our hiding spot, chasing the phantom signal of our phones as they drifted downstream. The silence that followed was terrifying. We stood in the shadows of the towering pines, the rain soaking through our clothes. For the first time, the hunter was blind, but we were stranded in the middle of nowhere with nothing but the clothes on our backs and a target on our heads. Jack turned to me, his breathing heavy. "Thorne thinks you're just a ghost from his past, Amy. But ghosts don't bleed, and ghosts don't fight back. We can't keep running. If we want to survive the night, we have to stop being the prey." I looked at his gun, then back at the road where the killers would eventually realize they'd been played. "How?" "We go back to where it started," Jack said, his eyes hard as flint. "The evidence they found today, it wasn't the only thing you left in Blackwood Falls, was it?" I felt a cold shiver that had nothing to do with the rain. He was right. There was one more piece of the puzzle, a piece I had been too afraid to remember, and Thorne was too arrogant to search for. "No," I whispered. "It wasn't." "Then let's go get it," Jack said, "before the sun comes up. Because once Thorne realizes we're still alive, he won't send a car. He'll send an army." Chapter 7. The Buried Truth. The forest felt different at night. Younger. More hungry. We left the car miles back, navigating by the pale glow of a handheld flashlight that Jack kept shielded behind his palm. Every snapping twig sounded like a gunshot. Every rustle of the wind felt like a whisper from the man who had tried to kill me. "Which way?" Jack whispered. He was looking at me, but I was looking at the trees. "The oak," I said, my voice barely audible. "The one they found the bones under. That's not where it ended. That's just where he started." I let him pass the yellow police tape, which now looked like tattered ghosts in the moonlight. The excavation site was a jagged scar in the earth, but I didn't stop there. I kept walking, counting my steps, feeling the phantom weight of a 7-year-old's backpack on my shoulders. I stopped in front of a hollowed-out cedar tree, 50 yards north of the grave. It was rotting from the inside, a dark mouth waiting to swallow a secret. When I ran, I began, my hand trembling as I reached into the hollow. I realized I had something in my pocket, something I had picked up from the ground right before the shots. I was a kid. I thought it was a toy, a shiny silver toy. My fingers brushed against something hard, wrapped in the remains of a plastic sandwich bag I'd tucked away 2 decades ago. I pulled it out. Jack shone the light on it. It wasn't a toy. It was a digital voice recorder, the old-fashioned kind, encased in brushed aluminum. "The man he killed that night," I whispered. "He was a journalist. He knew Thorne was coming. He started recording before the senator even stepped out of his car. I didn't just see the murder, Jack. I stole the confession." Jack took the recorder, his face pale. "If this still works, if the battery hasn't leaked through the circuit board, this isn't just evidence. This is a death warrant for the most powerful man in the state." Suddenly, the woods went silent. The cricket stopped. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. A red laser that appeared on Jack's chest, dancing like a blood-red firefly. "Drop it, detective." A voice boomed from the darkness. I didn't have to look up to know who it was. I recognized that voice. It was the same calm, professional tone that had haunted my nightmares. Senator Edward Thorne stepped into the clearing, flanked by 3 men with tactical rifles. He wasn't wearing a suit anymore. He was wearing a hunting jacket. "You really should have stayed a ghost, Amy," Thorne said, stepping into the light. He looked at the recorder in Jack's hand and smiled, a cold, empty expression. But I suppose some things just refuse to stay buried. Jack didn't drop the recorder. He tightened his grip. It's over, Thorne. The police know we're here. No, Detective, Thorne replied, raising his own weapon. The police know a rogue officer kidnapped a key witness and vanished into the woods. Anything that happens in these trees tonight, well, let's just say the forest is very good at keeping secrets. Chapter 8. The Last Echo. The red dot on Jack's chest didn't waver. It was a steady, burning eye in the dark. "The recording, Jack," Thorne said, his voice as smooth as polished stone. "Hand it over, and maybe, just maybe, this ends with a quick exit instead of a slow one." I looked at Jack. His face was a mask of sweat and grit. I saw his fingers tighten around the recorder, and then I saw his eyes shift, just a fraction, toward me. It was a signal, a silent plea to be ready. "You're right about one thing, Senator," Jack said, his voice dangerously low. "The forest is good at keeping secrets, but it's even better at swallowing men who think they're gods." In one sudden, violent motion, Jack didn't drop the recorder. He hurled it, not toward Thorne, but high into the canopy of the trees, toward the dark ravine. "Go!" Jack roared. The woods erupted. Thorne's men fired, the suppressed thuds of their rifles spitting dirt and bark into the air. Jack tackled the nearest guard, sending them both crashing into the excavation pit. I didn't think. I didn't scream. I dived into the undergrowth, the branches clawing at my face like skeletal fingers. I wasn't running away this time. I was running toward the sound of the recorder hitting the forest floor. Behind me, I heard the grunt of a struggle and the heavy crack of a handgun. Jack's gun. "Find her!" Thorne's voice lost its calm. It was a jagged edge now, raw with panic. "Find her and kill her!" I found the small silver device glinting in the mud near the edge of the cliff. As my fingers closed around it, a heavy boot slammed down onto my wrist. I gasped, the pain lancing up my arm like a lightning bolt. I looked up. Thorne stood over me, his face twisted in the moonlight. He looked old. He looked desperate. He pressed the muzzle of his pistol against my forehead. "You were a mistake I should have fixed 20 years ago," he hissed. "Then do it." I spat, my voice cracking but my eyes locked on his. "Do it and prove I was right. Prove that you're nothing but a coward with a badge and a suit." Thorne's finger tightened on the trigger. His eyes went cold. But before he could pull it, a voice cut through the trees. Not Jack's and not a killer's. "Senator Thorne, drop the weapon. Hands where we can see them." The forest was suddenly flooded with light, not the moon, but the blinding, blue and white strobe of police tactical units. Dozens of them. They swarmed the clearing like an incoming tide. Thorne froze. The world he had built, the empire of lies and shadows, shattered in the glare of 100 flashlights. He looked at me, then at the recorder in my hand, and for the first time, I saw it. The look of a man who realized he was finally, truly, the last witness to his own downfall. Jack staggered out of the brush, blood trailing down his temple but still standing. He looked at me, then at the police line. "We got him, Amy," he whispered, his voice breaking. "It's over." I looked down at the recorder. The light caught the small play button. I pressed it, and through the speaker, muffled by 20 years of dirt and silence, came the sound of Thorne's younger voice, confessing to a crime that was no longer a secret. The forest was no longer silent, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the dark. Chapter 9. The Sound of the Wind. The courtroom was unnervingly quiet when the verdict was read. There were no gasps, no dramatic outbursts. Just the heavy, rhythmic thud of a gavel that sounded like a door closing on 20 years of lies. Edward Thorne didn't look at me as they led him away in chains. The man who had once owned the state looked small, his expensive suit hanging off a frame that had finally been broken by the weight of the truth. I stood on the courthouse steps afterward, the sun warm on my face. It was the first time in my life the light didn't feel like a spotlight, but like a blanket. "You're not leaving, are you?" I turned to see Jack. He wasn't wearing his detective's badge anymore. He had resigned a week after the arrest, citing a sudden need for a long, quiet vacation. He looked different without the weight of the case on his shoulders. He looked like a man who could finally sleep through the night. I don't know, I said, and for the first time, the words didn't scare me. For 20 years, I only knew how to run. Staying still, it's a new skill I have to learn. Jack leaned against the stone railing, looking out over the city. The agency offered you witness protection. A new name, a fresh start in a different state. I shook my head. No more fake names, Jack. No more Claire. No more hiding in the shadows of someone else's life. My name is Amy. I think it's time I figured out who that actually is. He smiled, a genuine, tired smile. Well, Amy, if you ever need a place where the trees don't talk back and the coffee is actually drinkable, you know where to find me. He handed me a small envelope. Inside was the locket. It had been cleaned, the silver polished until it shone like a mirror. The photo inside was gone, ruined by the damp earth, but the metal was solid, real. Keep it, Jack said, as a reminder that the earth doesn't just bury things. It keeps them safe until someone is brave enough to look for them. I watched him walk away, disappearing into the crowd, not as a ghost, but as a man. I walked down the steps and kept going. I didn't look over my shoulder. I didn't check the reflections in the shop windows. I just listened to the sound of my own footsteps on the pavement. The forest was behind me. The secrets were gone. And for the first time in my life, when I looked toward the horizon, I didn't see an ending. I saw a beginning.
Thank you for listening to The Last Witness. This story was brought to you by Shiver Audiobooks. If you enjoyed this short thriller, please like, subscribe, and share it with fellow mystery lover. Your support keeps these stories coming. And check out our playlist for more gripping tales. And we'll see you in the next one.